2012 marked the 200th birthday of Charles Dickens, widely credited as the father of the serialized novel movement. He was also a giant fan of beer and pubs, as both featured heavily in his work. Now, here's the part where I should make that witty comment, but I've been drinking. That, and I am Evo Terra. And this is the Books and Beer Hangout.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Books and Beer. Our topic today, serialized books for life after Dickens. We have two fantastic guests with us. First up, Hugh, author and adventurer, self-publishing rock star, and Matthew Mather, author, futurist, and science fiction author. Gentlemen, please introduce yourselves, say hi, anything you'd want to add? Hugh.
Well, I'm Hugh. I'm the guy everybody's comparing to 50 Shades of Grey lately, even though I don't write any erotica. I'm trying to get my wife's permission for that, but she's not too keen on it. And I doubt I'd be very good at it anyway. I guess I'm doing well with the Wool series right now, and I'm a fan of the serialized format, and just thrilled to be on with you guys. Can't wait to hear what everybody has to say. I'm
Matthew Mather. I'm an aspiring erotica writer. But right now I'm really focusing on the science fiction aspect of things. As I said before, I did have a couple of beers. I thought that was kind of the entry point of getting into this interview today, so I had a couple there. So things are moving along already. I have a background. I mean, I'm writing now, but I have a background as a serial entrepreneur in the technology space. Done a lot of interesting stuff there, and just real happy to be here and happy to be chatting with Hugh again.
You are an overachiever, and you started on the beers already. What are you drinking as we do our beer review?
Well, I know it's kind of boring, but I start off with a couple of Stella this evening. Stella Artois is kind of a premium brand here, but back in England where I was born, actually it's called the White Beer. Kind of a low-class beer back there, but a favorite. Yeah.
How about you, Hugh?
I chilled a glass and put it in the freezer, and I was going to have a beer with me
right
while we were doing this, and I got talking with Matthew before we came on, and I never went and got it. I'm dying to drop my headphones and go grab it.
You go. Jeff and I will talk about what we're drinking. You go do that. So, Jeff, why about you start first?
I picked up a little something, Lagunitas something ale, which is absolutely fantastic on a warm evening in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Evo, what are you sporting? Dales again?
I thought about that. That's my always go-to beer, but I figured we're talking about these guys in serialized audiobooks, which means shorter versions, and you have to consume lots of these to go through. So I thought, what's better than getting a nice session beer by Full Sail Brewing Company? So, again, hotter than hell in Phoenix, and a session is the kind of beer that you can drink all day and not get completely and totally intoxicated. Perhaps I should test that theory here on the show. All right, so it looks like we finally got a Hugh back, and let's find out. All right, what are you going to drink now out of that beer, Mr. Howey?
Okay, I rarely drink, so this you guys might get all kinds of...
It's like a Latitude 48 to me.
Wow, you're good. Yeah, it's Latitude. There's no way you read that. You just recognized the blue label.
No, I just saw the label. So
yeah.
World-class beer nerd. World class.
I had one of those for lunch today too.
And a frosted glass. I hope I get a little credit for that.
I'll forgive you for that, actually, but that's a different thing altogether. All right, so that...
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's a longer story. Beer snobs, we don't like frosted glass. We like things that are settled temperature, especially for a nice IPA like that. Really.
All right, Evo.
I know. Sorry. All right.
I can mute Evo as well.
So let's talk books. As we said I don't know if we said it or not, but we should say this. Both of these gentlemen are big into serialized fiction, and that's where they're really starting to make a name for themselves, which, as you heard from the beginning of the show, that's Charles Dickens kind of started that, but there's been a resurgence in years, especially with electronic publishing. So, Matt, you're doing the Utopia Chronicles, and Hugh, you've done the Wool series, and each of these are really short reads, at least for the first book, and then they make several different. You've got several different books that go on with that. So let's talk mechanics. Matt, how short is book one of the Utopia Chronicles?
It's actually about 10,000 words, and I mean it's a little bit longer than a short story, but a little bit shorter than a novella. And the purpose in that is really to get something that a reader can. I think attention spans, just in a society, I think attention spans have been shortening. I think with the format, electronic formats, people's attention spans are shortening even more. So I think getting something pretty short that they can read in one sitting and get a bit of a pop out of it, get a little bit of emotional engagement with the character, and then if they get into that, then they'll get into the next one. So that's really the length I was looking at.
And Hugh, what about Wool? How long was that first one in that series?
It's 12,000 words, so it's about the same. And writers talk in words. Readers hear that and they have no idea, how long that is. But
right.
It's about 50 pages of a standard formatted book. Because I have the first Wool in print edition, and I know how far that goes. And I didn't mean to serialize the work. I wrote this self-contained novelette and put it on the Amazon store. It took off on its own. I was busy writing other stuff, and when this started outselling everything else that I was actively promoting at the time, I dropped what I was doing and started writing the second, third, and fourth entries. So it was kind of a lucky accident, but it's something that I've embraced. It's something I wanted to do with my very first novel, but I ended up going with a traditional publisher instead. But I see now the power of serialization, and I'm a huge fan of it now. Everything I do now, I'm thinking how to let people sample the work and decide whether or not it's for them. And then if they like it, provide a more rapid publishing pace and keep the quality up so they're not waiting a year between entries.
You went ahead and answered my next 5 questions, which I really appreciate.
We're done here?
So, Max, over to you, and then we'll just wrap early. So,
you want me to make up my own questions? Is that,
no, well, I'm going to verbalize some of them, and I do want to get your input on this. So, Hugh, you didn't start to serialize it. Did you have more stories for this world, or was this just an idea that came to you? It ended up that length just because that's how it worked out, and then you revisited it once the popularity took off?
Yeah, nothing that deliberate. It was a complete mess. This was a novel that I had wanted to write, never could make the time. I have way too many novels that I want to write that I can't get to, but this is an idea that's been bugging me for about 5 years, so I shortened it, put it out just to get it out. Didn't have a link to buy it on my website, zero promotion. It was just kind of something to purge, and I had no story after this. When the reviews started pouring in and everyone's saying, this is great, but it's too short, we want more of it, like I said, I dropped what I was doing, and for NaNoWriMo of 2011, which is National Novel Writing Month in November of every year, I started November 1st writing Wool 2 and wrote Wool 2, 3, and 4 in that month. And what's amazing about that is it's a NaNoWriMo book that's sold 150, 200,000 copies now. So it's just, none of this is supposed to happen. It's dumb luck.
Let me see, just quickly, if I can recap your strategy.
There's no strategy.
That you think is a mess. Throw it up with no visible link. Ignore it. Go off and write something else, and come back when it's hugely popular, and then write out the next 3 or 4 versions in a month. Is that really your advice to young, struggling?
This is what I tell, when people email me and ask me what to do, I tell them everything I did not do. I mean, this is really, it's irreproducible. It's
yes.
You're going to be keeping to the strategy going forward, Hugh?
No, I mean, I'll never be able to write like that ever again, I don't think. If you read the book and the reviews are, a lot of these reviewers are saying, I read this in 2 days. It's 540 pages. And I wrote it the way people are reading it. And Matthew and you guys, if you write, can attest to this. When you have a story that's that gripping, as a writer, you're just as into it as a reader will be, and you can't stop. I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to write. I was staying up until midnight. I was getting no sleep because I was consumed with this story. And I don't know that that'll ever happen to me again. I'll probably never be that taken over by a plot ever again. So
I'm feeling inspired over here.
Well, Matt, actually, I'm curious. I mean, tell me you've got a different story behind this one. Was it a happy accident that you fell into this, or was yours a little bit more plotted out?
I had about 10 years of planning behind it.
Yeah, okay.
No, it was. I'd actually had the thought of the. There's two things when you're not always two things. I had a story that I wanted to tell, but there was also, I guess, a world that I wanted to communicate to the readers, and so it was a fairly complex thing that I was trying to convey, and I decided to split it up into individual chunks to be able to let the readers get into it one piece at a time. And I know we're talking about sequels, but actually, and I was talking to Hugh about this just now, I actually designed this as sidequels. So it's actually, I built a world and the characters are inhabiting it, but they're actually all, as you go through each one of the stories, they're occupying the same space of time, but they're interacting side by side. So you'll see characters jump into the stories and out of the stories. And by doing that, this is a bit of a test, and I'll be able to tell you in a couple of months how it's worked out. But by doing this, the readers don't need to read story 1 or story 3. They could jump into story 4 and then read story 2, and just everything's happening side by side. So it's a little bit of a different take and experiment, and we'll see how people respond. So far, they're responding pretty well. Yeah.
You've got to read the first story in Ethiopia called Blue Skies. It'll get you hooked. It's one of the best things. I think it should be nominated for some of the awards next year for short stories. It's one of the best things I've read in a long time.
I've had the pleasure of reading both of them, and I enjoyed them immensely. Matt, a question about marketing. Do you find it? I mean, also people responding to the book, I get that, but trying to put yourself in this alternate universe series where one way was, now I'm going to write the full novel as opposed to I'm going to serialize it. Have you had a difficult time getting people the concept, getting them into the idea of serialized books, or do they take to it right away?
Yeah, well, I think you have a little bit. There is a little bit of a challenge there. Like I said, there's people's attention spans are, I think, are coming down a little bit. People still want to read a full, 500, 600-page book, but I think if you're starting out author, or if you got something that is not known, it helps to kind of shorten it down and bring it into this serial format. I think it's fairly new also. I mean, it's only been, we're living in the world with the Kindle and electronic books, but it's only been 2 or 3 years since this has happened. I can remember when I was looking online and saying, my God, electronic books are outselling physical books, and right now it's just like, physical books are completely gone. Like, the world's accelerating so quickly, and it's, and this is a science fiction story in itself, but it's happening right now, and I think in this new world, what Darwin or what they were doing way back, when with serializing works, I think it's sort of come back around full circle now. I think it's just a format that really works, especially in the 99 centile. Yeah.
One of the challenges I had was people were following the Wool series from the very first book, and when people saw this was going to be a series, I was getting a lot of complaints that I was charging, that I was basically with a serialized story that you're milking people. And one of the challenges was explaining to readers the way the royalty system works on Amazon, where you actually are far worse off serializing financially than you are publishing a book because of the difference in royalty rates. With a 99-cent story, we make 35 cents per entry, whereas if we charge $2.99 or more, we make 70% of that rate. So you double your royalty rate by waiting until you have it all together and publishing it at a higher price with one book. So one of the challenges I think an author has, and you can't charge less than 99 cents on Amazon unless you publish the book elsewhere for a different price and they price match it. It's very difficult. There's a delay. It's unwieldy. So hearing negative reviews about people reading a short story that they say the quality is great, but I wasted a whole $1 on this because it only took me an hour to read. Yeah, exactly. And you look at what a copy costs and a gallon of gas and how much time an author puts into even something 10,000 words. It can take me weeks to write and revise those 10,000 words, and that was one of the aspects of it that I was surprised at, that people would really have such a fit over having spent $1 and only being entertained for an hour.
What's your take on the price point of it? I mean, I assume both of you are getting enough out of the format, enough out of the versatility it gives you to keep doing it? Or are you reconsidering? Will you continue to do serialized work, or is it the cost downside too much?
I'll start off. I mean, it's difficult when you're, like Hugh's saying, if you're getting 30 cents a copy, it's difficult to sell enough volume to make a lot of money out of it. But it is a way of gathering attention, I think, and so it's a trade-off. It's almost like pricing it down to market something, and then when you get something that readers find interesting, it's a way of doing something fairly quickly. Also, like you had a really interesting idea, put it out as a kind of a long short story, and then people, they kind of wooled onto it and kind of took off from there. So I think it's almost a way of test marketing an idea.
Yeah, that's definitely how it worked for me. And the other advantage, there was a time there where all 5 of the Wool books were in the top 10 of some of the science fiction lists. And I think that's really the reason that I started getting the attention I did, because if you have one book in the top 10 list, you look like every other book in the top 10 list. There's one of each of you. And then this is another happy accident of the way it worked out for me. But because I wrote these so quickly, all the books were being ranked in the sales lists. And at one point, there were 6 of the top 10 books in science fiction were Wool books. And you get embarrassed, it's like
that is embarrassing.
Yeah, how terrible.
That's terrible.
That's exactly why I don't release top 10 books altogether.
I know that sounds ridiculous, but really, when you look at the list and you're like, you feel like you've broken this up on purpose in order to clog up. It felt unfair, but it also was the reason I think that it caught a lot of attention. But you say whether or not I consider doing this going forward. My next planned series is going to be serialized, but I've already learned people want to buy the whole thing at once it's out. And it's the Wool Omnibus that's been in the Amazon Top 100 for 3 months. The individual books have all dropped down in sales because once the reviews, as a matter of fact, a lot of the reviewers come out and say right up front, don't waste your time buying Wool 1, just buy the Omnibus because you'll want it. And so what does the reader prefer? They prefer to follow it as it goes on if they're an early adopter and they get to kind of be a part of that wave. But once it's complete, they don't want to buy it in individual chunks. They want to save some money, buy it at a cheaper price in one chunk. And so my plan with the next series that I do this with is to release them individually and then combine them again.
A question for both of you. We've been covering a little bit of the publisher and author side of things. Back to the writer side of things. How has producing serialized work impacted the way you think about your stories or the way you plot things out? Do you still have big arcs and then you go through and slice it, or are you writing in smaller bits that will serialize? How has it changed your approach?
Yeah, I do think when you start to adopt this mindset, I think it does. You start to think about. Well, I mean, I think about a big arc, and then I think about smaller chunks. But I mean, it's the same as writing. Also, I think chapters have gotten shorter. I've written some works, and people complain when it's being, 10 pages, to a chapter or something, which I used to remember being about chapter size, and now they want it to be about 2. So I think people's expectations are shifting a little bit. So I still think about it in terms of a large arc, but I'm starting to think about, making it into smaller chunks, little cliffhangers, which is, classic for serial type things.
Absolutely. Yeah, the cliffhangers are key. I think it's challenging to write a good serialized piece if you're publishing it as you're writing it. The reason for that is it's kind of like being a chess player where you can play multiple boards at once, or you can think several moves ahead. If you're not foreshadowing in book 1, things are going to happen in book 5. You're doing the reader a disservice. And as someone who was really upset at the way the TV show Lost unraveled, and you could tell they were making this up as they went along, and they were untrue to their they didn't have a vision for the first. They were just fumbling through it. You don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So in order for me to write the Wool series and for it to tie together and make sense, and for the last scene of the 5th book to be foreshadowed in the 2nd book, you have to do a lot of plotting before you write that one piece, and that's challenging. You have to spend a lot of time not writing, which is hard for a writer to do, to spend all that time doing preparatory stuff. But I think if you put your heart into it and you spend enough time on it, I think the result is rewarding for the reader.
I got a couple more questions for you here, and the stuff that you're giving out here is just amazing. I think we're going to have to release this podcast here in a serialized form, just to kind of tease that out. Yes. So, do you think though the serialized format? I've been a fan of it for a long time, but I've been trying to think of something in a serialized format other than fiction. Is there an opportunity out there for writers for other types of books to work in a serialized format, or is really just fiction where you're going to see it, and it's
I think, yeah, I think it's been done with nonfiction, hasn't it? Some of the long-form journalism pieces, and the New York Times will have a series that takes several editions to tease out. I know the Bill Clinton impeachment trial and the release of the papers that came out, all the leaked documents. Like every single day they had a new piece in this, and they some of that was sequential, and some of it was just the amount of information was so copious they couldn't contain it all in one piece. But I think nonfiction would be a wonderful avenue to explore serialized. And I think the Kindle singles would be a great way to do that, because they pay a better royalty for those. But I would love to see. I've tried to talk a friend of mine who's one of the chief medical examiners for Manhattan. I've tried to talk him into writing Kindle singles on some of the cases that he's worked. I would pay big bucks to read what he does for a living, and he's a phenomenal writer. He's written several thrillers, so the time is right for someone to jump on that.
Interesting. Yeah. All I have popping to mind is the BBC series with the world things with the penguins and yeah, that's not quite as serious as what Hugh's saying, but yeah.
So last question for each of you. For an author looking to get into serializing his work, any tips, either tools, sites to look at, things to approach or consider?
Yeah, I'll just do this to give Matthew some time to think, because it makes you look smarter.
I already got 5 things to talk about, so.
I think the most important thing is to learn how to create a feel for a character in a very short period of time. Just there's little quirks and traits and the things that a person carries on them. There's so many ways to define a character in a short time frame, and just learn how to put as much impact into as few words as possible. I think that's what really draws readers in, to not have to go through a lot of exposition and description and dialogue to get to the meat of a character or a situation or the tension of a moment. So for real good serialized work, you're writing short stories, and the challenge of a short story is to pack it all in. And so start at the crux of the moment. Don't waste your time with someone waking up in the morning and doing all the daily routine that a lot of writers want to ease into their writing. If you have to do that, but then throw all that away and start where your writing got really compelling, where you couldn't stop writing, and publish from there forward.
Matt?
Really?
Yeah. No, I think absolutely. I mean, when you're doing serialized work, you have to start with the characters. Obviously, you need to have an emotional engagement. Build that emotional engagement with them. I think with the serial work, I think the world that you're building it in becomes a character in itself, and that's maybe even the most important thing, because that's where the readers are going to keep coming back to. But I'll just add one thing that's a little bit off the side of that, is that there's, like, we're using Google Plus for doing our chat today. There's a lot of technology or interesting stuff you can do out there. I actually took some of the characters from my work, and because it was kind of an augmented reality work, I actually created LinkedIn pages for them. Some of them are still the book's set in the future, but some of them are alive right now. So I actually made them as real people on LinkedIn, and then got all these people. One of them's a professor at the University of Sussex, and actually got all these people, all the professors at MIT and Stanford and whatever, to link into her as if she was a real person. So so actually got these real people that are connecting in and having conversations that don't exist, that are characters in the book, and that adds a different, there's a lot of clever things that you can do like that to bring a different, aspect to what's happening.
That's brilliant.
Wow, great. Right, this is really not only re-empowering this idea behind the concept of serializing books, but also allowing authors the tools and techniques to do things just like that, Matt, that they certainly couldn't have done 5 years ago. This stuff didn't actually exist. Pretty amazing stuff, guys. Thank you very much for a fantastic show, guys. This is one of the most informative shows we've had thus far. I know that Jeff and I would like to keep talking to you guys for another hour on this, because we can go on and on and on about it, but
Sure.
We're not going to. We promised to keep things to a half an hour, and so we will. So, gentlemen, thanks to both of you for appearing here on the Books and Beer Hangout with Jeff and I. We do this on Google Plus every Thursday at 6 o'clock. If you're interested in this concept of serializing and you are an author out there and you're saying, golly gee, would this actually work for me? Jeff and I teach a class. It's called, we have some really clever name behind it that's escaping me right now, but the concept is writing really short works. Serializing works is one great way to do that, so we teach you how to take them to start to finish, and in 6 weeks you can do this too. Assuming you already have content prepared, we show you how to package it up and get everything ready to go and help with the promotion process. So check that out. epublishunum.com is where you can find more information about that. It's called The Quick and the Red. See how clever and interesting that actually was. So you can sign up for that class once again. Gentlemen, again, thank you very much for joining us here on the Books and Beer Hangout. And for those out watching, we appreciate you joining us. We'll see you guys next week. Ciao.
Thanks, Evo. Thanks, Jeff.
Ciao. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Bye.